Hey gang, just a reminder, if you're doing any reporting on the conflict in the Middle East, be sure to read our Middle East glossary in the language guide. In particular, I'm seeing Palestine in some of our communication and rough draft. We do not use Palestine to refer to the West Bank or Gaza. It's okay to use clips from protesters saying it, but we should not, as there is no modern country of Palestine. The CBC, get fucked. This one's actually multiple colonies. Australians, Aussies, any Aussies in the chat, we're going to be going after you here, as well as some, I think, New Zealanders are involved in this as well. But anyways, we're mostly going to be talking about Israel-Palestine and how the term Palestine is actually censored in the media. You're not allowed to use it. You can only refer to it as the Israeli state, Israel, and the Palestinian people is fine, but you cannot say Palestine, the country. Now, while all this is going down, please remember that things are still incredibly shitty. This was today, 3 hours ago, Israeli forces just arrested 2 Palestinian journalists from Sheikh Jarrah. By the way, everyone who was hardcore thirsting for cat girl IDF soldier and was just all like, oh, I can fix her. Just remember, this is what IDF soldiers do.
ارفع راسك ارفع راسك ارفع راسك ارفع راسك ايوه اعتقال اخت صحفيه لنا انت المسؤول هاي اعتقل الصحفي كمان. عرض عمالكم تسووا مدرسين بالسلاح جايين قدام
Now, I'm sure all of you saw what happened yesterday when there was an incredibly anti-Semitic attack that took place by known anti-Semite Seth Rogen. And I just want to speak about this quickly. And this was horrifying. Furious Jewish actor Seth Rogen mocks anti-Semitism activists. Comedian used wind emoji to reply to a Twitter post by Jewish journalist Eve Barlow, in which she shared an article detailing abuse she'd received for defending Israel, apparently agreeing with the bullying nickname Fartlow. Jewish actor Seth Rogen sparked outrage on Thursday after mocking a journalist who wrote an article expressing concern about the rise of anti-Semitism. Journalist Eve Barlow, who is Jewish, published a link from her Twitter account on the piece he wrote for a tabloid magazine, in which she compared the current rise of anti-Semitism on social media to digital pogroms. In the piece, Barlow mentions how she received a barrage of abuse from pro-Palestinian brigades on social media after defending Israel during the recent war in Gaza. She wrote that amongst the many derogatory slurs directed at her, the most frequent was the mocking of her name as Eve Fartlow. Horrifying. It got so bad yesterday that, left-wing communist Hassan Piker apparently tweeted out the words Eve Fartlow. And then several other people followed suit, engaging in just blatant anti-Semitism collectively, and doing it flagrantly, flying in the face of human decency, and clearly contributing towards what can only be described as some of the most horrific attacks ever perpetrated on the internet. This led to the term Eve Fartlow trending effectively on Twitter, which again, horrifying. One cannot even begin to comprehend how devastating some of this may be. When Barlow posted the article on her own Twitter account, Rogen was quick to mock her, replying to the tweet with an emoji of a gust of wind, indicating that he agreed with the bullying nickname. Rogen's reply received over 10,000 likes, 10,000 anti-Semites in essence. That's how bad the problem got there. 765 retweets as a result, fueling the abuse directed at the Jewish journalist. Some, however, came to the defense of Barlow, including former Democratic New York State Assemblyman Dov Hikind. How desperate are you to be liked by Jew haters that you're trolling a Jew on their behalf, he wrote. Someone else replied, at Seth Rogen, you chose to cyberbully a Jewish woman on her article about being cyberbullied due to anti-Semitism. Wild. You hate to see it. Now, on top of everything else, I mean, Jeff, you think this is funny, but I mean, you're pretty much engaging in some pretty hardcore bigotry right there. When we fart high, they fart low. I mean, I don't know. That might just have to be a permanent ban if you're gonna keep saying these deeply anti-Semitic things in my chat. They have no place here. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. And while this is all happening, I'd like to remind everybody that there is actually, in fact, real censorship going down in multiple countries. By the way, there's a whole bunch of people in Canada who have signed this petition together about how they are not allowed to report properly on this issue. EP Laura Green told staff to avoid using Palestine even in personal exchange, so to avoid mentioning it in coverage, in script drafts and communications. Newsroom, anti-Arab and anti-Muslim bigotry in a nutshell, erasing an entire people. Journalists in Australia censored for demanding better coverage of Israel and Palestine. At least a dozen journalists were asked to remove their signatures from an open letter criticizing reporting on the region. Don't forget about the Associated Press journalist who just got fired for the exact same thing. 5 journalists in Australia published an open letter on May 14th calling for news outlets to do better coverage of Israel and Palestine by actively including Palestinian perspectives in coverage and refraining from both-siderisms that equates the victims of a military occupation with its instigators. More than 720 journalists and media staffers have since signed the letter criticizing coverage of the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Israel has killed over 240 Palestinians, 66 of them children, and has left parts of the Gaza completely destroyed, including a tower that houses offices for the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, amongst other media non-governmental organizations. Hamas, meanwhile, has killed 12 Israelis, including 2 children. Already, some of the journalists have faced consequences. At least a dozen staffers at 2 of Australia's largest broadcasting corporations, Special Broadcasting Service and Australian Broadcasting Corporation, were asked by management to remove their signatures from the letter, according to letter organizers and the media. Now, make no mistake, by the way, there is absolutely a huge problem in North America with anti-Semitism. There's a massive one. There's a rise in anti-Semitic attacks, especially under Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, they started to spike. That shit was like, it was barely covered. And like, there was shootings at synagogues, shit like that. Like, that is fucking anti-Semitism. That is fucking white supremacists. That is fucking Nazi shit, where people are like actually still trying to fucking eradicate Jewish people from the face of the earth. That stuff should be called out for what it is. Saying fart low on Twitter and saying that it's like in any way comparable to the kind of anti-Semitism that people experienced in, say, the Holocaust or stuff like that, completely devalues the gravity of those words and the purpose of all that. Okay, like I can't believe that this is becoming a thing. Like, you are making this into a cartoon. And on the other side of the, like, you know, the argument, or the other side of this discussion, there is actual censorship. Like, cancel culture? Are we not always outraged about this? Isn't freedom of the press supposed to be this huge thing? Is this the thing that unites people on the right and the left? Like, everyone thinks that freedom of speech is tantamount and paramount. It's the first fucking article of the Constitution. Like, this shit is supposed to be important. And meanwhile, globally, people are being fired or censored simply for saying the word Palestine. Palestine. As if Palestine, even acknowledging the idea of a Palestinian state outright, instead of just assuming that the only way this can exist is Israel as it is, like, that is very scary. Fundamentally scary. That, like, I know the Overton window has changed and social media doesn't buy into the lies as much as they used to, but I mean, come on, people should be acknowledging this. The people who are being particularly pressured are younger journalists and people of color, people who are who have an Arab background. There's not a suspicion of Jewish journalists doing their job, whereas there is for Arab journalists who are Australian and Jewish. We recognize a growing dissatisfaction in both this country and elsewhere with the media's treatment of Palestine. Many of us are seeking change, but lack sufficient power and organizations to push back against the status quo. We believe the coverage of Palestine must be improved, that it should no longer prioritize the same discredited spokespeople and tired narratives, and that new voices are urgently needed. Man, oh man. And by the way, I would like to announce this, okay? Canada has just come out with a statement a public statement, and this is the following thing. Canada's remarks at the UN Human Rights Council special sessions to address the grave human rights situation in occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Now, the UN Council on Human Rights is currently holding an emergency session to talk about the potential of labeling the actions of Israel of engaging in war crimes. They absolutely were. They bombed fucking hospitals, 19 medical centers, blood banks, the only COVID testing center. That's biological warfare. I mean, that alone, if that is not going to be labeled as war crimes, like, these words have no meaning. Absolutely, like, there's no point. There's no point going forward. But anyways, I will say, in the way this is worded, even though it is Canada, even though Justin Trudeau is an avowed, like, you know, pro-Israel in every way possible, giving them military aid, support, you name it, he has always been a staunch supporter of Israel. It was surprising to hear this worded the way it is. It's still both-siderisms, but let's hear it. Canada welcomes the ceasefire in Israel and Gaza and urges further de-escalation of tensions. A sustainable long-term solution must be found for both the Palestinian and Israeli people. Canada will continue to work with Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and the international community to break the cycle of violence, loss of life, and suffering. No, you won't, you fucking liars. Canada firmly believes in the right of Palestinians and Israelis to live with dignity, without fear, and with the human rights respected. We support the principle of two states for two peoples, with both Israelis and Palestinians living within secure borders that are mutually respected and recognized. Okay, but that's not what's happening. The continued expansion of settlements, demolitions, and evictions constitute a serious obstacle to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. Canada calls on Israel to stop settlement activities, including those in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. These activities are a violation of international law and must cease. Canada reiterates that it does not recognize permanent Israeli control over territories occupied in 1967. The indiscriminate barrage of rockets fired by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad into Israel was completely unacceptable. Back to both-siderism. Canada supports Israel's right to live in peace with its neighbors within secure boundaries and its right to assure its own security. This right must be exercised in a way that is proportionate and fully respecting human rights and international law. So back to, yeah. So the end of this, obviously, they dial it back and they want to go back to both-siderism. But I will say this. This one paragraph is the most strongly worded language I have seen Canada putting forward officially in a long ass time. And so this might be a little bit indicative of a slight shift in the Overton window and the idea that perhaps the zeitgeist has moved a little bit. So that is good. You know, Israel has a right to exist equals death to Palestinians. Like, the way this is all worded, like, Israelis have a right to exist in every way, shape, or form. Israel, as it currently stands, is ethnically cleansing Palestinians. So Israel, as it currently exists, is in contradiction to the right of Palestinians to exist as well. So Israelis have every right to exist. That is not a controversial statement, I think, to be able to say that. And again, very, very scary. CBC staff have also received an email last week reminding them of the CBC guidelines not to use the word Palestine in coverage. Hey gang, just a reminder, if you're doing any reporting on the conflict in the Middle East, be sure to read our Middle East glossary in the language guide. In particular, I'm seeing Palestine in some of our communication and rough draft. We do not use Palestine to refer to the West Bank or Gaza. It's okay to use clips from protesters saying it, but we should not, as there is no modern country of Palestine. The CBC, get fucked. Get absolutely fucked. How can you say this? Green added that it is also good practice to avoid using Palestine colloquially in our own exchanges, as to reduce the risk that someone might accidentally write or say something that is published or broadcast. 1984 shit. 1984 shit, you know? Like, erasing language for the sole purpose of you not using it in regular use? Like, that is fucking, yeah, what is Israel occupying? Like, holy shit. The email also included the CBC guidelines that advised writing Palestinian militants in Gaza instead of Hamas, unless referring to an action claimed by the group. Well, meanwhile, in Canada, you know, 1988, Greg origin, this shit's going down. But yes, props off to Ireland. You goddamn Irish. The luck at the Irish, you know, this is fucking fantastic. Ireland is officially condemning Israeli actions and is going to stop giving them material aid. Meanwhile, Canada's like, oh, don't use the word Palestine. You say that, it might actually become real. Is Palestine like the Candyman? If you say it 3 times, is it gonna like reveal itself?
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, you know, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like, just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's It's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our god, Xander Corvus, we shall build ornate temples in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker and the Tim Caucus, we aim to be the best court jesters your money can buy. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Tofox, Jeff Lamb, Sint Forzi, we are your humble vassals ready to till your land. To our Knights of the Round Table, Omni, Mr. Anderson, Riley and Anna, Ryan Craig, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophoja, Saren 42, Chronic to Hempog, The Great Houdini, Bo and Jenny, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Jay Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Constance Joyce Lacheris. We raise our glass of mead and we salute you.